Hello, and welcome to the common response on Belknap class. Now, and to an extent the Truxton class, of course. I'm going to start off by saying Puget sound. Okay, fine. There's been a very number of various Americans commenting on it, going, but yes. There seems to be a slight difference on this describing whether it's Puget or Puget. Um, yeah, in Britain it's fun. So, fun pre-23. At the time of Malta, the Belknap was the fleet flagship of the time of Malta, the Belknap was the fleet flagship of the Sixth Fleet USA fleet. She was built as a flagship after a collision with the Kennedy. She was probably used because of the command and control aboard the Belknap. Pretty much, yes. Ronald Graves, after post JFK rebuild, she became a class of one ship, and the rest of the class were referred to as the Joseph Daniels class. Yes, it does become an interesting scenario post her rebuild, but that's also a very US thing for that to happen. Thumper E-23. His family was probably honoured because, at the time, the US Navy named all destroyers, frigates, and ocean escorts after noteworthy Naval and Marine Corps personnel, which included civilians. Yes, this is something which the US Navy does like to do. They like to name their things after people. And I both like it, and I both consider it problematic, because if you consider the... one of the arguments I recently had with someone was that the reason the US Navy should stop building aircraft carriers is because they're running out of presidents they want to name ships after. And I don't really consider that a good reason to stop building aircraft carriers, but I was surprised at the conviction of the person who was making that case. That seemed like a spurious argument to me, but they were really wrapped up in it. And it wasn't online. It was an in-person argument. And I actually did turn around to someone who knows both of us quite well, and I went, "Oh, are they being serious here, or is this just supposed to be making me laugh?" And the person, the third person in the room, actually turned around and went, "No, I've had to listen to this for the last X months. You have to listen to it now as well." I'm still not sure if I managed to persuade them that it wasn't a good argument. I have no idea. But we'll leave that to one side. It was definitely not the best argument. And I thought, well, you just go round again on the presidents you do like. If you want to just concentrate on dead presidents. But even they will all have issues. Most people in the past do not live up to the standards of today. Not wholly. It's just a fact of life. Humanity evolves. Datrowski. Biddle me this, biddle me that. Who's the rat that begrudged another ship to the family Wainwright? Considering the considering the history of the family, it was well deserved. U.S. Wainwright, CG-28, Pride of Charleston Waterfront, 89-91, M3. Yeah, the Wainwrights definitely deserve ships. They do. Magnus. Sorry, Chief. Best I could find for Steverett and Enterprise was their immediate predecessors in the period May 1940-1941, which started with USS Sterett at DD-4007, escorting USS Enterprise CV-6 from San Diego to Pearl Harbor, and both operated at Pearl until Sterett escorted Mississippi from Pearl to back to the Atlantic Fleet, where Sterett worked frequently with USS Wasp. John Sykes. Just remember, the operating crew during the first night of the accident at the 3 Mile Island nuclear station on March 28, 1979, were all ex-US Navy reactor operators. That's not unusual. Let's be honest, the US nuclear program depends quite heavily on former US naval reactor personnel. That is probably the best, most reliable pipeline of people with both the required training and the required security required security clearance they need for operating those reactors. So you'll find a large number of them in those areas still to this day. Also, they're people who are usually trained to work odd hours and stay awake for quite a long time. The perfect video length, one 500ml bottle of Iron Brew long. Meteorites. I served in the USN from 1977 to 1997 on submarines as part of naval nuclear power program. During that time, I served with and interacted with many people that had served on the various nuclear service vessels in service during that time period, both those in nuclear power program and those who were in more conventional ratings on those vessels. The common theme amongst all of them was that those vessels were capable of much greater speeds than the official published figures. You could say that the official speed for these ships were more akin to the USN submarines forces reply when asked about the depth and speed capabilities of our nuclear submarines, i.e. greater than 400 feet and greater than 20 knots. In short, none of your business. One gent, an electrician mate in the nuclear program that I served with for 2 years in the Radiological Controls Division of the US Hunley, AS-31 in Holy Loch, had served on both the Truxton and Enterprise. He related the way they measured the ship's speed and power output on the Enterprise was by the way of the torsion meters on the propeller shafts. They measured how much the shafts twisted under load, and that limiting factor on the Enterprise's top speed was the hydrodynamics and strength of the hull. That doesn't surprise me. I think the Enterprise had about 8 reactors. Admittedly, the chemistry of each was, of course, radically different, as all nuclear reactors are. But she had 8. And this again goes back to the point of the nuclear service escorts. It was always the strange thing I found, because I heard people making the same case, the case of, we need the littoral combat ships to be able to go 40 plus knots to keep up with our carriers and provide them with escort. What are they going to protect against? Exactly. But no, we don't need larger escorts to go 40 knots. And actually, it's the reverse. You need a few escorts, which are supposed to be probably quite big escorts, that can go the speed necessary to keep up with the carrier on full speed deployment and not worry about the fuel they're burning through. I.e., you don't have to worry about logistics of getting fleet replenishment ships to refuel them. You can just surge that group. But you need basically 1, maybe 2 per carrier. And you can probably get around with having a force strength of 1.5 per carrier, and that will probably guarantee you enough available when you need them to operate with, if you're doing a surge, with 2 per carrier for any surge. Because the carriers which are actually available are actually going to be in the area where they're going to be required to have those lower forces. Or won't already be there with their 1 and their escorting destroyers. So don't need a surged capacity. You don't need a mass of little ships. Just don't. Not that can do high speed. You need a mass of little ships that can bibble around the place. Bibble and bobble all over the place. That's lovely. We call them river-class OPVs in the Royal Navy, and long may we keep procuring some more. We need about another 6 to do all the jobs we're requiring of them. If anyone wants to start a conversation on that one, basically we need another 7 Mark 30 Type 31s, but we'll call them Type 32s because they'd be Type 31 batch 2s. But hey ho, if you want to call them Type 32s, you can go and call them whatever you like. And yes, we need at least another 6, 7 R-class, river-class, patrol vessels. Just wandering around the world in terms of presence mission. And that will suddenly free up the load on the Type 26s, Type 45s, Type 83s, and all the other vessels in terms of counter-piracy, in terms of maritime security, in terms of presence, in terms of watching the Russians when they go wandering down the frigating coast, which they keep doing. You need a Type 31 or 32 for that job. You need a Type 31 with a carrier battle group as a flak frigate. You need an extra security for the carrier while the Type 26s and the 45 or 83 are off doing the picket duty and anti-submarine duties. You need a Type 31 to be a forward presence ship in the Far East that you can readily resupply so it can be presence in the 5 powers and the AUKUS region. All those things are necessary. You need a Type 31 wandering around the UK for when the Russians turn up. You need river-class patrol vessels in Gibraltar, probably in the Far East, doing much the same job as the Type 31, but basically being force multipliers. Probably with a Type 31 in the Middle East, again being force multipliers, and a patrol around the UK for fisheries protection and the Falkland Islands. And if you can get a Type 31 down there as well, that's great to send one down there. Because, again, Type 31 is fine for being a guard ship most of the time. And, basically, any time we send something else, that tells the Argentinians, yes, we have noticed what you've been doing, you've been being strange. If they have been being strange. If they were not, it's just a Type 31 as routine. But if suddenly there's a Type 26 deployed, or a Type 45, or a Type 83 deployed, that's raising the level. Suddenly you have sent down we still only sent one ship down. We've just gone from our normal present ship, which is very nice, able to defend itself and be part of a task group, to one of our, they're pickets. You want to take them on? And if you want to put that in 1930s terminology, that's basically your Arafusa class cruiser, your town class cruiser, and your county class cruiser. One is your normal presence. Hello, we're here to say hello. We're a cruiser, but we're not one of the cruisers you're going to massively worry about. But we're still a cruiser, so you can't really ignore us. Next one up is low levels. We're a cruiser. We're a light cruiser, officially, because we've got 6-inch guns. But you are going to worry about us. But we're not here to make you worried in an official way. And the other one about that is, we're a county class cruiser. We have 8-inch guns. Yes, we are here to make you worried in an official way. You've been noted. We've seen what you're doing. Stop it. Next thing above us turns up and it's got 15-inch guns and doesn't like to move this far from home unless it really has to. AK, Renown, Repulse, Hood. Hello, we've come to visit. Please don't make the next level up. That's a battle squadron. When they move, they don't move for it. They don't move for polite experiences. Or a case, of course, if you're in the Mediterranean and it's happening, it's the next one up is, hello, I'm HMS Warspite. I carry around the Admiral-in-Chief of the Mediterranean Army because he's about the only one who's considered capable of harnessing my machine spirit. It works. Ronald Grace, nuclear power in the USN is saturated steam, whereas 1200 psi boilers are superheated. Michael Larry, you'll never see another USN ship named after Joseph Daniels. Jody Daniels was heavily involved in an 1898 Wellington coup and strongly backed subsequent laws that effectively disenfranchised most blacks in North Carolina. Quite possibly. And if I did more historical research, yeah, I would actually, from whatever, I wouldn't be surprised. But still, that's the annoying thing. People aren't perfect. Fairline. When our introduction to main gun systems began in gun school, the Mark 42 stood out despite the new Mark 45 because of a ridiculous rate of fire. Yeah, the Mark 42. Excellent, and Dunphy. Railguns were cancelled because of rail heating and wear issues, not because of power issues. They simply couldn't deliver on the range and accuracy they wanted. Okay, so yes, we do tend to talk about the cost of the rails and the fact that the electric charging between them did cause a major issue in terms of barrel replacement. It meant you would have to replace the barrel more often. However, I am very sorry to tell you this, Alex, but the major issue, that was considered an issue which metallurgical development could get past. At current rates of technology, we could have worked on it, and we could have probably designed something. It would have been expensive the first time around, but it was doable. The problematic one was the power supply, because the railgun uses up power at a tremendous rate, and a gas turbine just can't keep up. Not at the gas turbine and power the ship and do all the other stuff it needs to do. So I need to carry extra gas turbines, which you only turn on to power the railgun, and even then you probably will need a capacitor function because of the discharge rate over time, and it just ends up being problematic, and working out how to deal with it, and very expensive and very, very complicated to fix. I remember having a long discussion with engineers involved in several programs, tangentially and directly related to it. And the thing that kept coming back to me was, these issues are solvable. The capacitor one is one we don't know how to solve. The other ones we know how to. We can't solve them, but we know how to solve them. The capacitor one, we don't know how to. And that's the problem. So you will hear a lot of writing up about the rail heating and wear issues, because that was a problem. They could tell you how to solve it. They couldn't solve it, but at the moment, but they could tell you how they could go about solving it. The capacitor one was one they couldn't. And that was almost unanimous. There were a couple of people who thought they could solve it. But there were also a couple of people who were sitting there going, yeah, if we want to solve it, nuclear power is the quick solution, and that's the one which will work right away. Ground 1973. For what it's worth, a fictional member of the class makes an appearance John Winston's The Flying Temeraire. One of the authors was a more serious novels. However, he might also have had problems with the names given to the class, as the one he created was the US named James T. Doig. Send penguins! Send penguins! I've noticed a lot of comments recently from you, and I'm glad to see them. I know I'm reading back months ago, but I do enjoy them. I just need to know whether you want the penguins to be sent are the fluffy kind with feathers, which it's slightly more difficult for me to do, or the chocolate kind. If you want the chocolate penguin biscuits, that can probably be arranged at some point. This may be biased from seeing how the Navy spent the entire end of the core life of Virginia, but one of the advantages I saw in my service for nuke cruisers was their phenomenal ability to operate without external support. There were a couple of counter-narcotic operations where we were kept on station for nearly a month on end without any kind of replenishment because we could. FFV would run out after about 2 to 3 weeks. Fresh milk started to go off after 3 to 4 weeks. Want to talk food irradiation? That sounds fun. But there was never any issues about sufficient stores aboard ship that I heard about while on those cruises. Those cruises were slogs because the time between mail delivery and pre-onboard internet age was horrible. Yes, I'm still better. I can understand. And because at least once we ended up having less than 10 days warning for a 2 to 3 month deployment. That plays hob with crew morale, but ship had sufficient supplies to keep going. For a present ship for hotspots and shadow flag missions in questionable areas, a nuke cruiser could operate on its own. Having nuke escorts for nuke carriers would add some flexibility, but I also think the solo presence mission would have been even more useful. There is an argument there, and I do acknowledge it. I just think myself that basically that's something you do as well as the nuke escort or the carriers, and which is again why I say about 1.5 times the number of carriers is how many nuclear cruisers you probably want. So you probably go, right, how many nuclear carriers are we going to have? 10. So how many nuclear cruisers we need? 15. And that's about it. Christopher, I agree with you on the gun. Should be a dual mount, and preferably we would like to do them. From a logistic perspective, in a major war goes on a longer month or two, guns will become progressively more valuable because of logistics. You want to see what's happened in Ukraine? If we consider the sheer amount of tube artillery, i.e. gun artillery, still being used and being critical to to the operations, that is a major factor in what's going on in Ukraine, and that is a good example because in the nicest way there is no sensible reason to be using anti-ship munitions in anti-land targets in Ukraine, but the Russians are doing that because they're running out of missiles. Tim Anderson, a lot closer on Puget sounds, but not quite there. King of Rock, what is a Wain and how does one build one? A Wainwright is a wagon builder. Although it can also be used as a these days, it can also be used as shorthand for the roughly 200 fellows that are described by an author called Wainwright in books describing his walks in the English Lake District. Yes, you can use Wainwright's walks as a bit of a thing. Stuart, there should have been 9 nuclear-powered escorts. There were 4 ships in the Virginia class: Virginia, Texas, Mississippi, and Arkansas. With that many heavy escorts and need for additional non-nuclear light escorts at the scene of engagement to provide outside ASW coverage, couldn't there be more than one CVN deployed, such as sending TFS-77 to the Taiwan Straits or forming the Strike Fleet Atlantic to proceed north through the GIUK gap? I love the image of all those nuclear-powered ships having the strategic mobility to gather quickly in a crisis, and we really could use them now. Pretty much, that is what they were there for. You could bring them together, and you could basically, as like earlier Connor said, you could their top speed. Well, you've got probably about 12,000 tons of capability heading to you heading strategically between theatres at the same speeds as the carriers can. So you can rapidly gather forces. Pigeon, for a nuclear Burke, I would have gone with the same weapons and sensor suite, but a larger hull, 15,000 tons for a true nuclear cruiser. With 122 VLS missiles forward and an aft, and a 5-inch 54 Mark 45 guns fore and aft, as with decos. There would be a helicopter hangar and flight deck forward of the aft guns and VLS missiles, with 4 20mm CRS guns and lozenge arrangement and superstructure. Nathan Oaken. Interesting, huh? Oh, good lord, that's a long comment. Oh, that's a lovely long comment. Let me read that out. It's a very long comment though. Nathan Oaken, prior to Aegis, I might need a drink to actually get a drink halfway through this, which also had a standard missile type 2, with some minor mods initially. The various SM types before the SM6 had semi-active homing systems that required the firing a ship to both track target with dedicated radar director and then light up that same target's high-frequency illuminator for the missile to home on. Later SM missile versions could hand off a missile from a firing ship to another close to the target, if at very long range. This semi-active guidance method caused the missiles to always need the firing ship or the hand-off ship, when this was added, to be dedicated to a specific target for all the missiles' flight, whether all the way homing with the SM-1 or uplink-downlink missile trajectory control via the radar to get it near the target before the homing system was activated for the SM-2 and after. This drastically slowed down the number of targets that could be fired on at any given time. This rate of engagement was further slowed down by the fact that most SM missile ships, other than a few double-enders, only had the twin-rail launcher and a pair of SBG-55B, the SM-supported version with many mods, directors on one end of the ship, so that the superstructure could get in the way of aiming a target on a blind end of the ship. This only limited the radar by about 30 degrees to either side of the ship center line in that opposite direction, so it could usually be easily adjusted for by changing the ship course. But this was not true of the launcher if firing at a target that was short to medium range and on the other end of the ship. So because the fact that most of especially with a Terrier, the launcher was designed to aim the launcher exactly like a gun at the optimum elevation, and the superstructure against low-angle targets could interfere over any bearing angle about 80 to 120 degrees, which was more difficult to handle by the ship if it had little warning and or limited maneuverability region. This launcher angle problem was simply accepted for most of the life of the Tasker Terrier and the first launcher limited Aegis ships. The angle limits of the launcher were worked out and entered into digital computers by hand to warn missile operators of the hard stop bearing limits to firing. I worked at, well, NSMCS, which I know you've called Nemesis, or Nemesis occasionally. Like the NSWS, CS and the NSWC, Port Huron Division on Terrier system and later computer engineer, the digital CIO or C152 computers replaced the old electronic mechanical calculators used with the pre-SM versions of the Terrier missiles. Cool. One day, when hand entering the rather large table of hard top angle values for the launcher into the next update of the Terrier digital computer software, I had a huge light bulb go off my head. What was I doing? These are homing missiles, designed to adjust their flight path if the target is no longer flying along the best hit line direction, and the homing systems work very well. Why not fire the missiles cocked off to one side or upward by the launcher and simply tell the missile where it was on launcher that the target was now in that off-center position, and let the missile correct itself to compensate. This will eliminate most of all the launcher hard stop cutout, not pointing zones. I called this Fire Terrier around the blind zone change and put it in during 1973 as a beneficial suggestion. The same individual person's suggestion used to suggest a toilet design fix. My boss looked at it and agreed with me. At first nobody upstairs could believe that this was possible, but my boss forced them to send it to the Applied Physics Laboratory of Johns Hopkins University, who were the design agents for the Terrier and had to test and OK any significant change to the missile system. They did their Monte Carlo computer analysis and found that it worked against any target down to a 10,000 yard minimum range due to the booster of the Terrier missiles, and were amazed by this result. They renamed it Curve Fire, and it quickly was entered as a minimum elevation angle in a blind launcher arc into the Terrier software. Eventually they decided to fire the SM2 missiles before Terrier was terminated in 1972, upward at 45 degrees in any bearing direction, and this solved the problem permanently. So I seem to have had a big hand in vertical launch, later too, as the ultimate curved fire version. Cool, and congratulations. And thank you. David Uncat. Of course, standard also implies a battle flag, which also implies the use of potency weapon. It's such a useful word. And I glad you commented that. Now, Nathan, some notes on various US Navy warship design, and you've done another very nice long comment. I'm going to read out some of these, but not all of them. Mainly because I'm trying to keep these to 20 minutes, and I'm already at 25 minutes. Some more notes on various US Navy warships. Top speeds of all US Navy warships today are the design requirement, maximum speeds, not their actual maximum speeds. The first to do this were nuclear submarines, and they decided to do it for warships later. Yes, like the Royal Navy, they've been doing this for. This has been going on for a long time. Never as the Eisenhower would testify to in World War II. Do not trust the Royal Navy's claimed top speed on anything. It found Rodney and Renown could both go faster than they were supposed to, especially in rough weather. It just wasn't fair. Terrier, number 2, Terrier went away in 1992 when the US decommissioned all non-nuclear steam-powered warships. The 3 Terrier nukes were no longer enough to justify their costs, so they went too. 3 aircraft carriers were built with Terrier missile air defense systems. Big mistake. Aircraft carriers could not give a plug nickel, to be kind, for an AA system if it caused any kind of problem with funding or operating aircraft. Since Terrier was big and expensive and could cause problems with aircraft if the aircraft and missile firing trajectories overlapped, the Terrier system had a major maintenance problems most of the time. They were removed. Yep. Basically, fragging issues on flight control. It causes fun. Anderson, I saw the Fox when I took a tour of Taiwan in the mid-1970s. Cool. Diego, maybe the powertrain on Bainbridge Truxton could not handle the additional power from reactors and they used the same gearing and such as conventional member of the class. Redesigning for additional power might have been expensive. My bad. Truxton has 15,000 shaft horsepower less than other Belknaps despite her reactor. Bainbridge had 20,000 shaft horsepower less than the other Leahys despite her being nuclear reactor powered. Officially. Paul from Chicago. Biddle enters the Royal Navy at 20 after being at sea for 7 years, I'm assuming in merchant service. If he's an American, probably in the Caribbean rather than John Company or similar. Biddle probably would have been a mid or then a master's mate after a few months at sea. I wish the Wikipedia article was clearer on us, and I agree. I find it difficult to believe he would have spent much time with Nelson, unless Biddle was also collecting money as a tutor teaching navigation or similar. Reading the wiki article, Biddle sounds like an enterprising and a capable officer. That makes sense. If he leaves the RN as a mastermate and joins the Continental, almost immediately get promoted to a 14-gun brig. He's certainly something. I'm not quite sure I agree with his entire history. I think he might have had some creative license going on. But, you know, I can say that in the common response video. I don't say that in the actual video. Wait, Halsey could see logistics by work? I thought his eyes could not resolve the words on it. Sometimes he could. Occasionally it floated into the right direction. It was very selective seeing. Sean Nordine. I vaguely remember during the last failed cruiser program, during another period of high gas petrol prices, Congress tried to mandate that all new large vessels be nuclear powered. Some were already being produced and not concluded. If you search the internet with the following keywords, Navy nuclear powered surface ships CRS reports, you'll find a report to Congress in the issue in 2011. Of course, the US Navy didn't build any new cruisers, they dragged out the program and let it die as they seemed to not know what they really wanted from them except that they wanted to replace the TICOs. I personally think having a handful of nuclear powered escorts for the carriers makes perfect sense, but the US Navy wasted a lot of its past budget on last generation ships by going way over budget in the name of formational instead of evolutionary designs, which have served the US Navy well during the Cold War. Now they really need to replace the latter Cold War ships, so I don't see them going nuclear, given their they need hull numbers more than anything. Yep. Nice hearing. Yeah, technically, didn't the Falklands would have likely done to the Americans what it did to the RN, aka showing inadequate sound they were? It would have certainly caused issues, but there again, the US Navy would have had their carriers down there, and their carriers came with things like Hawkeye, an airborne early warning, which would have made life a lot easier in many other regards. So they might not have shown quite so much gaps quite so publicly. All you needed was a helicopter with a radar strapped on it, and frankly, they'd already worked out the idea, that's why they developed it so quickly. But no one had actually put it together and built it, and that's... yeah. Sorry, rant over. Yeah, the RIM 66 SM1 is comparable to C-Dart, and C-Dart was seen as inaccurate after 1982. Yes, well, the C-Dart of that version. Let's be real, if it's not been for economic issues plus government stability for which why C-Slug and C-Cap were around by 1982, it should have been replaced outright by 1982 with the Goalkeeper, CLS, Seawolf, and Lightweight Seawolf. Lightweight Seawolf especially should have replaced a lot of things very quickly. Anyway, the standard missile design is 46 years old. Most other navies have done the correct thing and retired their Cold War SAM in favour of a new modern SAM system, so why can't the US get with times and get a modern SAM system, not a sheep in wolf's clothing SAM system? Because the standard missile, whilst it's still called the standard missile, is no longer the standard missile of the period where they sort of started out with. They might officially have got to SM6, but let's be honest, there have been so many variants within each class that they're actually probably at SM66. It's just... there are so many different types of them going on. But lightweight Seawolf is especially a problem. If that had been properly funded and deployed, then you can pretty much replace all those quite a lot of ships' losses. Because if you think about it, if all the ships which had Sea Slug and Sea Cat had Seawolf of variations on them replacing it, maybe even Sea Dart replacing them in ships which are suitably sized, the Falklands War changes quite dramatically. Because the sheer amount of the sheer development of the missiles and the volume of missiles you can put up that are going to hit more likely. Because you're talking about replacing first, second generation missiles with third and fourth generation missiles. Jonathan Smith, I was wondering if one reason for going with every 10th hull of each escort class as a nuke, as opposed to building another dedicated class of nuclear cruisers after Fort Virginias, was an attempt to avoid block obsolescence. It pretty much enforces a slow rate of production, so nuclear escorts don't all wear out at once, and as a new conventional escort class is designed, its nuclear compatible also gets whatever new systems it's introduced. That is a good point. I'd like it to be a continued policy that every 8th or every 10th ship produced by the US Navy in terms of escorts is a nuclear version. Annoyed one. Hello. Hope you weren't annoyed by this video. My dad served on the USS Long Beach, CG-9, USS Warden, CG-18, USS Reeves, CG-24, and USS Fox, CG-33. He worked in the missile house on a Mark 10 Terrier launcher. I had the privilege of seeing how the missile system on board operates. Cool. Anyway, thank you very much, Aaron. This was a 20-minute long video. It's 33. Probably going to be about 35 minutes by the time I finish. Thank you very much, everyone, for the comments. They're always well received and always usually enjoyed. Sometimes they're thought-provoking. What I find interesting about some videos is their ability to generate comments long after I've put them up. It's like the Queen Elizabeth class video. It's still it's gone up about 3-4 months ago, and it's still generating comments as of an hour ago, and it's just fun. I like that. I like the fact that the videos are part of an ongoing conversation. They don't just happen and then they go. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and hope you enjoyed.